In this video, we're going to have a look at how we can use the short written method for division when we have decimal remainders. So we'll get started, and hopefully you'll notice that there's not a significant difference in our method. So this question here I've got is 461 divided by 4. So I'm going to ask myself, how many times does 4 go into 461? I've got my skeleton tables here to help me. So let's get started. The first thing I ask myself is, how many times does 4 go into 4? Well, the answer to that is 1, because 1 times 4 is 4. I move on to my next digit, which is 6. How many times does 4 go into 6? Well, again, the answer there is 1, because 1 times 4 is 4, but I needed to get to 6, so my remainder is 2, and I bring my remainder over to the next place value column. Now I've got the number 21, so I'm going to ask myself, how many times does 4 go into 21? The answer there is 5, because 5 times 4 is 20, and I have got a remainder of 1. I'm going to need to bring my remainder into the next place value column. And I know what to do here, because here's the ones column of my number, 461. The next place value column along is the tenths column. To show the tenths, I need to put my decimal point. So I'm going to put my decimal point here, and I'm also going to put it here. Now I can move over into the tenths column, because the decimal point has shown me that this is with the ones column, and then beyond here I've got my tenths, my hundredths, and my thousandths. So I had a remainder of 1, and I'm going to bring that over to the next place value column, and next to it I need to put a placeholder 0. And now my method returns to normal. I've got the number 10 here. I can look at this as 10, asking myself, how many times does 4 go into 10? How many times does 4 go into 10? Well, the answer to that is 2, because 4 times 2 is 8. And again, I've got a remainder. I've got a remainder of 2, so I bring that over to the next place value column. And what I need to do is put a placeholder 0 next to that 2. And now I ask myself, how many times does 4 go into 20? 4 goes into 20 5 times, and there's no more remainders. So the answer to that question is 115.25. So take a look at that question again if you need to. I'm going to move on and show you another example. So here's another example of this question, of a question like that. I've got 8,051 divided by 8. So I'm asking myself, how many times does 8 go into 8,051? I've got my skeleton tables to help me. So I start, as I always do, in the first column here. How many times does 8 go into 8? 8 goes into itself once. Then I've got a 0 here. Now, if I'm ever asking myself how many times does the number go into 0, the answer to that is always going to be 0. And I can move on to my next digit, which is a 5. How many times does 8 go into 5? Well, 8 is bigger than 5. So I won't be able to get 8 into 5. 5 is not in the 8 times tables. So I'm going to put a 0 here and carry my 5 into the next place value column. So now I'm asking myself, how many times does 8 go into 51? The closest I can get to 51 in my 8 times tables is 48 over here. And that was 6 times 8. So 8 goes into 51 6 times, because 6 times 8 is 48, and that leaves me with a remainder of 3. Now, before I put my remainder down, I need to remember what to put here to show that I'm moving past my ones column and into the tenths, into the decimal places. So to mark my decimal places, I need to put a decimal point here. So now I can bring my remainder of 3 over to the tenths column, and next to it I put a placeholder 0. So hopefully you're seeing here, when we bring remainders over into the tenths column, or the hundredths, the thousandths, etc., we need to put a placeholder 0 next to them. And then we can treat the question like we normally do. So I would ask myself here, how many times does 8 go into 30? 8 goes into 30 3 times, because 8 times 3 is 24. So I have a remainder of 6. So how many times, and I put my placeholder 0, how many times does 8 go into 60? How many times does 8 go into 60? Well, I know the answer to that is 7. Because 7 times 8 is 56. And I have a remainder of 4. Just going to extend my line here. I have a remainder of 4. And I need to put a placeholder 0 next to that 4. So now I ask myself, how many times does 8 go into 40? 8 goes into 40 5 times, because 5 times 8 is 40, meaning I have no remainders. So I've come to the end of my answer. So my answer is 1006.375. So the key thing to take away from this is that when I come to the end of my digit, when I come to the ones column, in order to bring a remainder into the tenths column, all I need to do is remember to put my decimal point and to place a placeholder 0 next to my remainder. So each time here I've put a placeholder 0 next to the remainder, and then you can continue the question as you normally would. So you remember your decimal and you remember your placeholder 0.